gas entrapment. In a braze joint, flux is made to be an oxygen interceptor. If you use it inside the joint, as we do, where they'll flux the saw blade, then put the carbide in it like so, you have flux inside the braze joint. And we'll see the brazing video where when you're through, they pull the saw tip out a little bit and release that trapped flux gas, and then they allow it to go back in. And do you sell purified flux? Not yet?
No.
Okay. Flux also has some inert inclusions in it. They can burn the tungsten carbide, combinations of things. This is stuff people have given me. A chill line. Temperature control is important, and temperature control is important in our industry because steel starts a transformation about 100 degrees above the brazing temperature. So if they braze a saw plate and they get it too hot, they get the braze alloy too hot, they seriously weaken the steel and the shoulder snaps off because the steel has lost its temper and gotten hard. Getting flux too thin. For some reason, people have a tendency to think of flux as being horribly expensive. This was kind of interesting. Let's see, where was it? In your fans, new locations, furnaces. What we call the Monday morning brazing problem. We've had this come up before. A lot of people in our industry, once again, they'll put the saw plate on a thick steel table, shim it up a little bit so the tips are in place and start brazing. On Monday morning, that thick steel plate, maybe that thick and that big around, has been sitting over the weekend, quite often in an unheated shop. So the guy comes in and he starts brazing, and if they're brazing from one side with a torch, what's happening is that the big steel plate underneath is serving as a heat sink, and it's sucking all the braze out. So it'll look good from the top, and it may be a good braze a third of the way through or half the way through, but it's real weak and it fails in service. You also see this thing with new furnaces, if they change the shop temperature, if they change fans, something like that. So brazing with a torch, a handheld torch particularly, takes place in an environment, and that environment can affect it. So I say this stuff, I think most of this stuff is online. We'll get down to the truly horrible saw blade. There's brazing in this, but this actually went to one of the fussiest guys there is at a Weyerhaeuser mill, which is one of the highest standard timber companies there are. The first problem was there was two different sizes of saw tips on it. These were too short. They weren't round. You can see the little round things there? Those are hemispherical. That's indicative of overheating. When you overheat, the zinc forms bubbles. So this braze alloy got too hot. This is probably okay, but only marginally so. Here you can see the flow back onto the plate. The steel's clean because that's a good flow back onto the plate. Much better than over here where you don't have the wetting onto the plate. You have a huge zinc bubble up here, which is not good. Part of the problem you have here, if you see this area from here to here, that's a pretty thick area. We pre-tin tips. We put a measured amount of braze alloy on the tips. We use a figure called average silver depth. So instead of forming a hump, if it was square and whatnot, we call it 0.010 of an inch, which I came up with that because it was a nice number, and I was damn tired of working with the concept of less or more, as in give me less or give me more. What it should do is form about 3 to 5 thousandths of an inch in it, and then enough to come out on the sides and form fillets. If a customer has a brazing problem, typically they will do two things. The average customer, particularly a hand brazier, has control over two things, and that's the temperature and the pressure. And they will try, so if they run into a problem, they will make sure they're getting it hot enough and they have a real strong tendency to push the parts together, which is a lot like a new guy with a wrench who wants to make sure that the bolt's tight. In this case, they'll push it so close together that they'll shove all the braze alloy out of the joint. And I've seen it where the only braze alloy that was in the joint was the stuff that was able to wick between the grinding marks. This is quite, if you have a really good brazier and highly skilled, it gets worse. If they're conscientious and highly skilled, you're much more likely to see this. It's a cleanliness problem typically, but they don't know that and they have no way to address cleanliness. So they work with what they do have, which is temperature and pressure. They tend to overheat the braze alloy. They tend to push it in too hard. You can see here, this is much too big a shoulder on it. Here we have examples of cleanliness. This gap looks like this gap. I bought a little proscope, and if you watch CSI, they use a little proscope. It's a handheld digital microscope. Here's the gaps at 30x, and 30x is a pretty good magnification for tools, but you can see it. There's 50x. You get down here, you can see where the saw was run, and this is wood fibers impacted in it. Here's heat stress. Heat stress is identifiable by a nice smooth curve, like so. You also get a curve in what's sometimes described as an L shape, like that, or they'll describe it as a chair shape. This is, we talked earlier about as the steel shrinks, it stresses the carbide, and the carbide rips. In this case, there's several problems. The bubbles show that it was overheated slightly. The big one is they forced the braze alloy out, and they don't have that nice, you need a nice thick coating, 3 to 5 thousandths of braze alloy in an impact situation like this. This is what happens if it's really, the tip really is broken. Instead of having one smooth fracture plane, or you could call that two if you like, but you have multiple fracture planes where it's beaten and broken. This came out of Great Britain. This was one of them. I took a look at it, told them I could do some recommendations. They said they've already solved it. So that happens a lot when you ask for money. But here you see real bad flow on the steel, okay, which is obvious. It should flow back in a smooth curve. It's also been burnt. Here you see big bubbles in the braze alloy. This was a tri-metal shim, and the tri-metal shim came off. You can tell, you can get some idea of how badly the material's been burnt by the color of it. We don't use it much anymore, but the green color is a particular oxide, the rose color is a particular oxide, a red color is a particular oxide. It doesn't matter. Silver, when you're through with the braze joint, should look just about like silver braze alloy should look just about like brand new braze alloy. If there's any other color in it, they burn it. This is router bit failure. This is an example of, here you can see the goldish is the braze alloy. Let's take the duck. This is an upside down duck's head. There's the ducks. But here you can see the underlying material. Here you can see the braze alloy. Here you can see a bad surface treatment on the carbide. To treat carbide, there's an LB Tony company in Dubois, Pennsylvania that we recommend because they've been doing it the longest. They're expensive. They're also in Pennsylvania, and carbide's expensive to ship, but their stuff works. Their stuff works much more often than anybody else. You can also plate carbide. A lot of people will try and plate carbide without getting the surface treatment right. If you do that, then the plating peels off. Here's an example where the part failed. Here's the underlying material. Here's the braze alloy, still in good shape, and then the gray on top of the braze alloy is the plating that peeled off. That, of course, obviously is in no way a braze failure problem.